What is it that makes the concept of, or maybe more accurately, our perception of beauty so special to the extent that it's your first piece of evidence in the line of argument charging that our perception is very, very misleading?
Oh, right. So in my book, I talk about our perception of beauty partly because I think it's a good introduction to evolutionary ideas. What is it that we find attractive? And most people are interested in that topic anyway. So I talked about it in my book because it's a fun topic. We all have a natural interest in it, and there are surprising results from evolutionary theory. And one of the things that comes out of the evolutionary theory is that first, our feeling of sexual attractiveness is really, from an evolutionary point of view, a sophisticated inference where we use lots of sensory information. You meet a person, and within just a few hundred milliseconds, your senses are picking up all sorts of visual, auditory, and smell information. And you're doing one of the most sophisticated computations you do in your entire life. You're estimating the reproductive fitness of the person in front of you. How likely is it that this person could have and raise successfully children? So you're not consciously thinking. You're just thinking this person looks great, or you're thinking they don't look great. Whatever it might be. Have a scale from hot to not, and then that's just your knee-jerk reaction. But what's going on behind that emotional reaction is a very sophisticated computation where you're literally evaluating scores and scores of cues, and the cues themselves are not always consistent. So they give contradictory information, and so you're adjudicating among all these cues and coming up with a bottom line. What is the reproductive potential of this person? How likely are they to successfully have and raise kids, to be a good father or mother, basically? And so, and that the output of that sophisticated computation is a feeling that you could, on a scale from 0 to 10, for example, that's a feeling that you get. And it's not just humans that have this, but all sorts of other species are evaluating potential mates. And there's the very humorous one of the jewel beetle.
The stubbies.
That's right. So the jewel beetle is this beetle. There are many of them in Australia and the outback, and they're dippled, glossy, and brown. And the males fly, and the females are flightless. But the males fly around looking for females, and when he finds one that looks good, he alights and mates. And the funny thing is that a lot of Australian guys drinking these beers in the bottles that he calls stubbies. They're short brown bottles that are dimpled, glossy, and just the right shade of brown to tickle the fancy of these beetles. The guys, these Australian guys throwing their beer bottles out in the outback, and the jewel beetle males were flocking all over these bottles. They're just crawling all over them because those bottles chicked off everything that the male was looking for. Here, this is a female. She's dimpled, glossy, and brown, and she's huge. And even when the beetles are crawling on the bottle, they have full body contact with the bottle. They cannot. They still are. They're swooning over this bottle. They're trying to mate with this bottle. So what we think of as beauty and attractiveness, clearly you start to see that. So evolution, from an evolutionary point of view, that is what I just described. It's an estimate of the reproductive potential of the person or the entity in front of you. The jewel beetle is doing it as well. He's making an estimate of the reproductive potential of this, and in his estimate, that bottle, that stubby, is really, really hot. So he's all over it, and the species would have gone extinct, actually, probably. They had to help those beetles save the species. And it was really quite strong. So what's going on here? Clearly, evolution didn't give the male jewel beetle a true insight into what a real female beetle was. It gave him a simple trick, a little hack. A female, an eligible female, is something dippled, glossy, and brown. The bigger, the better. That's apparently some little trick like that, and it makes sense from an evolutionary point of view. You on the one hand, you need to do the computations to determine whether something is an eligible female, but you also need to make the computations as simple and inexpensive as possible, because computations require calories. And for every calorie that you waste or spend on, computations, you have to go out, kill something and eat it to get those calories. And so there are selection pressures to do things on the cheap. And so that's going to be, and that's one of the points that Pinker makes in his book, How the Mind Works, and also his paper, So How Does the Mind Work? So Pinker points this kind of thing out. So I'm not saying anything new here. This is sort of, brilliant guys like Pinker have been saying this. So I'm just repeating what is standard in evolutionary theory. Where I go beyond is to say that, evolution itself is a physicalist theory, and we have to actually go beyond space-time. So that I love evolutionary theory, and within space-time, it's the right theory. It's the right theory of biological evolution. But if we're going to have a theory of consciousness outside of space-time, it better project into space-time and show us where evolution by natural selection comes out as a special case. That gets into another philosophy thing about the philosophy of science and the sequence of scientific theories that we have in science. That we may want to talk about that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, for the moment though, since you're totally right that we are all so interested in attractiveness, and probably, to be fair though, more human attractiveness than beetle attractiveness, and I also know that you're an expert on facial attractiveness. How does some of the research on iris sizes and limbal rings, which are a term that most of our listeners actually probably won't be familiar with, support this contention about perception's disconnect from truth?
That's right. So when you look at a person's face, you also get a hit of attractiveness or not of that face. And there are many, many cues that you use. Again, unconsciously, this is automatic. And among them are, there are many, many cues, but one that I talk about in my book, and one that I worked with a graduate student of mine, Darren Peshek, who did a lot of great work on this. What we worked on was the idea that if you look at a human person's eye closely, you can see the white of the eye, and then there's the dark iris. And if the iris is not too dark, you can sometimes see a little ring right where the white of the eye, the so-called sclera, meets the iris. There's a ring. For people with blue eyes or light brown, very light brown eyes, you can see this much more easily. You can see a ring, and as I was looking at that ring in various pictures, I realized that it looked to me like in babies, the ring looked more distinct and bigger, relatively speaking, than in adults. And that was really interesting to me, because that suggested that the ring then could be a cue to age and also to health. If your eye gets old and gets cloudy, then you can't see the iris or that limbal ring very well. So having a clear and thick limbal ring would indicate a healthy eye, and could also indicate, again, statistically, youth. So that was just the intuition I had. So I had a lot of my students, they got hundreds of pictures of photos of people of various ages, and zoomed in on the eyes and measured the width of the limbal rings. And we got a statistical distribution that showed that, yes, as you age, the relative width of the limbal ring declines with age. And so we made the clean prediction that a clear and thick limbal ring would increase the attractiveness of a person. Also, I predicted that the youth aspect would be, it turns out that it's slightly more important in male ratings of female attractiveness to emphasize youth. Youth is also important in female ratings of male attractiveness, but not quite as strong as male ratings of female attractiveness. So we also, thought there could be some differences in male and female ratings. And so one of the experiments we did was we would take a picture of some face, some guy's face or some woman's face, and we would just make two pictures, the same picture twice in front of the person, but in one picture, we altered the limbal rings and made them a little bit thicker. That's all we did. Otherwise, the pictures were identical. And so the person, their instruction would be to sit down, you're going to look at a screen and you're going to see two faces, pick which one is the most attractive, just left button or right button for left or right face. And they start doing and then many times the subjects would be confused. They're the same face. You're asking me to judge and the faces are just exactly the same. We say, well, just humorous, just go with your gut, just pick one. And so consciously, they thought the faces were identical, but unconsciously, they well above chance picked the face that had the thicker limbal ring. They actually were getting the signal of attractiveness, even though they weren't consciously aware of it. So there are many, once you start going down this path, there are many, many different cues that you can study. So the white of the eye can be, the sclera is more slightly bluish in infants than in adults. It's a little bit thinner, and there's a choroid layer underneath it that's blue, and so you get a slight bluish tint to the white of the eye is a signal of youth, whereas a slight yellowish tint is a signal of older age and also of ill health, statistically. Again, these are all statistical things. This is not absolute. So another prediction is, if you take someone's eyes and you, especially for like a female's eye, you make them just a little bit bluish on the whites of the eyes. That's going to be a signal of youth. You may not want to do that with male eyes because you don't want, women aren't interested in kids. They don't want boys, they want men, right? So you have to be careful. What you do for a woman's face is not the same as what you're going to do for a man's face on the eyes. But when we do this, it again works. You get the ratings of attractiveness to come out as you expect, and all under the radar. No one. So you can actually use this. This is stuff you can use on your Facebook page or whatever. You can take if you want to look more attractive, there are things you can do. Just go to your eyes, go in there in Photoshop, again, be careful. If you're a guy, don't give yourself too blue an eye, because now you can start to look a little bit too boyish. But you can make it slightly, if you're a woman, you can make a slightly bluer sclera, make a slightly thicker limbal ring, and you will be more attractive. There are many, those are just two. There are many, many things you can do.